Picture this. It's 2017 and the crypto world is in chaos. Bitcoin, the original digital currency, is more popular than ever. But with that popularity came problems. Transactions slowed down, fees skyrocketed, and suddenly the dream of peer-to-peer electronic cash felt like it was slipping away. If you wanted to buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin, you might end up paying more in fees than the coffee itself. For early believers who thought Bitcoin would become a true global payment system, this was heartbreaking. The dream of frictionless, everyday transactions was being drowned out by scaling bottlenecks and debates about Bitcoin's future. Out of that conflict was born Bitcoin Cash, BCH. A group of developers, miners, and community members decided to fork Bitcoin, splitting the chain into two. On one side, you had Bitcoin, BTC, focusing on being digital gold, a store of value. On the other, you had Bitcoin Cash, determined to carry forward Satoshi Nakamoto's original vision. Money for the people, fast and cheap enough for daily use. The fork was controversial, even painful. Families and friendships in the crypto space were divided. But at its heart, the split represented a philosophical divide. Should Bitcoin be about storing value long-term like gold, or should it be about spending value like cash? Bitcoin Cash chose the latter. What made Bitcoin Cash different? Its block size. While Bitcoin kept smaller blocks, limiting the number of transactions that could fit into each one, Bitcoin Cash expanded its block size, initially to 8 MB, later up to 32 MB. This allowed many more transactions to be processed per block, keeping fees low and throughput high. To its supporters, this was the practical path to adoption. But here's the question: has Bitcoin Cash delivered on its promise? In the years since its creation, Bitcoin Cash has built its own ecosystem of wallets, merchants, and users. It's gained traction in parts of the world where high fees are more than an inconvenience. They're a barrier to survival. For small businesses and emerging economies, Bitcoin Cash has offered a way to accept payments without middlemen. For remittances, it has provided a low-cost alternative to traditional money transfers. Yet, it has also faced criticism. Its adoption has not matched Bitcoin's, and its place in the crypto world has sometimes been overshadowed by newer projects. But in 2025, Bitcoin Cash is still here, still moving forward, and still fighting to prove that crypto as cash is not just possible but necessary. To understand the vision behind Bitcoin Cash, we have to go back to the debates that split the Bitcoin community. Bitcoin was originally described by Satoshi Nakamoto as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The idea was simple. You could send value online directly to another person, without banks, without borders, without permission. For the first few years, Bitcoin worked this way. Transactions were cheap and the network could handle the demand. But as adoption grew, cracks began to show. Bitcoin's blocks, limited to just 1 megabyte, were filling up. Each block could only hold a certain number of transactions, and with millions of people joining the network, demand far exceeded capacity. Fees skyrocketed, sometimes reaching more than $30 for a single transaction. For those who saw Bitcoin as cash for the internet, this was unacceptable. The community split into two camps. One camp argued that Bitcoin should keep small blocks and scale through second-layer solutions like the Lightning Network. They saw Bitcoin's role evolving into digital gold, a secure, scarce asset to be held rather than spent. The other camp insisted that Bitcoin was meant to be used directly, every day, by anyone, without extra layers. To them, raising the block size was the obvious fix. This debate reached a boiling point, leading to a hard fork. Bitcoin Cash was born. It shared Bitcoin's history and code up to that moment, but chose a different path moving forward. Its guiding principle was clear: restore Bitcoin's vision as peer-to-peer electronic cash. From day one, Bitcoin Cash increased the block size from 1 MB to 8 MB, eventually raising it to 32 MB. This meant BCH could handle far more transactions per block, keeping fees extremely low, often just a fraction of a cent. While Bitcoin was moving toward being digital gold, Bitcoin Cash positioned itself as digital cash. The vision was bold: a world where anyone could pay anyone, anywhere, instantly and cheaply, without the need for banks or intermediaries. Supporters believed this was especially important for people in countries with unstable currencies, high remittance fees, or limited banking access. For them, Bitcoin Cash wasn't about speculation. It was about survival and empowerment. Over time, Bitcoin Cash communities grew around this mission. Wallets, merchant tools, and payment apps were built to make BCH spending as seamless as possible. Cities in countries like Venezuela, Nigeria, and parts of Southeast Asia saw grassroots movements where small businesses and families adopted BCH for daily use. The Bitcoin Cash vision can be summed up in one word: usability. Unlike coins designed primarily as investments, BCH has always focused on being usable money: fast, affordable, and borderless. But turning that vision into reality has not been easy. Adoption has grown, but not at the scale many hoped. Competing payment-focused blockchains and stablecoins have emerged, offering alternatives. And critics argue that bigger blocks alone aren't enough to guarantee global scaling. Still, the heart of Bitcoin Cash's vision hasn't changed. It continues to fight for a world where crypto isn't just held in wallets but spent in shops, sent across borders, and used by everyday people. Bitcoin Cash might share its roots with Bitcoin, but over the years it has carved out its own path technologically. Its ecosystem is built around one central idea: keep transactions fast, cheap, and accessible for everyone. The most important difference lies in block size. Bitcoin Cash expanded block capacity well beyond Bitcoin's 1 byte limit. Today, BCH blocks can reach up to 32 MB, which means tens of thousands of transactions can be processed per block. This gives the network far greater throughput than Bitcoin, ensuring fees stay low even during periods of heavy activity. For context, while sending Bitcoin during peak congestion might cost dollars in fees, a BCH transaction often costs less than a cent. Consensus on the network is maintained through proof of work, just like Bitcoin, using the SHA-256 algorithm. In fact, miners can switch between mining BTC and BCH depending on profitability, since the underlying hashing function is the same. This ensures Bitcoin Cash inherits Bitcoin's strong security model while still offering its own adjustments for usability. Another critical feature is fast transaction finality. Bitcoin Cash integrates features like zero confirmation transactions, sometimes called instant transactions. While not as secure as fully confirmed ones, they allow merchants to accept payments quickly without waiting for multiple block confirmations. This is essential for real-world commerce, where people expect transactions to clear as fast as a card swipe. Over time, Bitcoin Cash has also worked on smart contract functionality. While it doesn't aim to rival Ethereum or Solana in complex decentralized applications, BCH supports simplified smart contracts through protocols like CashScript. This has opened the door for token issuance, decentralized finance, DeFi experiments, and NFT projects built on top of the BCH chain. The ecosystem also includes innovations like cash tokens. Cash tokens bring native tokenization to Bitcoin Cash, allowing developers to create fungible and non-fungible tokens directly on the network. These tokens are secured by the BCH blockchain and can be used for DeFi, governance, payments, or collectibles, broadening BCH's use cases beyond simple peer-to-peer transfers. When it comes to wallets, Bitcoin Cash is supported by a wide variety, from the official Bitcoin Com wallet to Electron Cash, and mobile-first apps tailored for daily spending. Many of these wallets integrate merchant features, QR code payments, and support for cash tokens, making BCH more practical for real-world commerce. On the merchant side, the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem has pushed for adoption through payment processors like BitPay and GoCrypto, enabling businesses worldwide to accept BCH as payment. This aligns with the project's original vision of being usable money, not just a speculative asset. Finally, the network has stayed true to one principle: keep it simple. While other blockchains chase complex architectures, Bitcoin Cash keeps its base layer focused on reliable, fast, and low-cost transactions. Developers then extend functionality through optional layers, toolkits, and protocols. This makes the ecosystem flexible, simple enough for payments, but expandable enough for new experiments like tokenization and DeFi. Still, technology is only part of the story. What really matters is how Bitcoin Cash is being used in the real world, and whether people are adopting it the way its creators envisioned. If Bitcoin Cash was created to be used as money, the big question is, has it actually been adopted in the real world? The answer is mixed, but there are real examples where BCH has stepped in as more than just an investment. One of the most visible areas is merchant adoption. Since its launch, Bitcoin Cash has been integrated into payment processors like BitPay, GoCrypto, and Paytaka, allowing thousands of businesses to accept BCH for goods and services. From online retailers to brick-and-mortar shops, BCH payments are often as simple as scanning a QR code. For merchants, the appeal is clear. Transactions are fast, fees are tiny, and settlement happens directly, no middlemen taking cuts. BCH has seen strong grassroots use in regions facing economic instability. In Venezuela, where hyperinflation devastated the national currency, communities turned to cryptocurrencies for survival. Bitcoin Cash supporters launched initiatives to onboard small businesses, taxi drivers, and everyday people to BCH as a stable and usable alternative to bolivars. Videos and reports showed families paying for groceries and meals using BCH wallets, proving that digital cash could work in real life. Similarly, in parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, local projects have promoted BCH as a low-cost solution for payments and remittances. In countries where sending money abroad often costs double-digit percentages in fees, Bitcoin Cash has offered a near-instant alternative. For families depending on remittances, saving even a few dollars per transfer can make a major difference. Charity and aid projects have also tapped into BCH's low fees. The Eat BCH campaign raised donations in Bitcoin Cash to feed families in Venezuela and South Sudan. Because transactions were so cheap, every cent of donor money could go directly to food purchases instead of being eaten up by banking fees. Stories like these highlighted Bitcoin Cash's potential as a humanitarian tool, not just a speculative asset. At the same time, adoption has grown in digital ecosystems. Gaming platforms, online tipping systems, and freelance marketplaces have experimented with BCH as a fast settlement currency. Its low cost and simplicity make it suitable for microtransactions, something that's nearly impossible with high-fee networks. However, adoption hasn't always met the expectations of its supporters. While BCH has carved out strong use cases, it hasn't become the global, everyday money many envisioned. Stablecoins like USDT and USDC have absorbed much of the payment market, especially for remittances because they combine low fees with dollar stability. Competing blockchains also attract developers and merchants with flashy features and large ecosystems. Still, BCH's strength lies in its simplicity and reliability. It doesn't rely on experimental scaling solutions or speculative tokenomics. It does one thing very well: fast, cheap, peer-to-peer payments. And for the communities that need exactly that, Bitcoin Cash remains a lifeline. For all the passion behind Bitcoin Cash, the project has faced its share of challenges and criticisms. Some of these come from outside, while others have come from within its own community. The first major challenge is identity. Bitcoin Cash was born from a split with Bitcoin, and ever since it has had to live in Bitcoin's shadow. To many outside observers, BCH is simply another Bitcoin fork, not a unique ecosystem in its own right. While Bitcoin branded itself as digital gold and found a clear narrative, Bitcoin Cash has struggled at times to convince the wider public of its role as digital cash. The second challenge is competition. BCH was seen as the leading alternative for fast, cheap crypto payments. But now, the landscape is crowded. Stablecoins like USDT and USDC dominate the remittance and settlement space. Blockchains like Solana and Stellar offer near-zero fees with growing ecosystems. Even Bitcoin itself, through Lightning Network, has started addressing its scaling problem. For Bitcoin Cash to thrive, it must differentiate itself clearly and show why it's still relevant in a world full of payment solutions. Another recurring criticism is around decentralization and governance. BCH has experienced internal conflicts, most notably the split created Bitcoin SV. Disagreements about scaling, leadership, and direction have sometimes fractured the community. These disputes not only hurt adoption but also make outsiders question whether BCH can maintain unity long-term. Then there's the developer ecosystem. While BCH has introduced innovations like cash tokens and cash script, its developer community is smaller compared to Ethereum, Solana, or even Bitcoin's Lightning Network. Without a critical mass of builders creating apps, tools, and services, the ecosystem risks stagnation. On the technical side, critics argue that large block sizes may not be a perfect scaling solution. While bigger blocks allow more transactions, they also increase storage and bandwidth requirements for running a node. Over time, this could reduce the number of people who can participate as validators, raising concerns about centralization. BCH supporters counter that hardware and internet speeds are improving, making these fears overblown. But the debate remains active. Despite these hurdles, Bitcoin Cash still has a future to fight for. Its mission, peer-to-peer electronic cash, remains simple, clear, and powerful. In regions suffering from inflation or poor banking infrastructure, BCH continues to prove its worth. With cash tokens, BCH has also opened the door to DeFi, NFTs, and other on-chain innovations, giving it new use cases beyond payments. The outlook for Bitcoin Cash depends on whether it can stay true to its roots while adapting to a changing landscape. If it can expand adoption in underserved markets, attract more developers, and strengthen its community, BCH could solidify itself as the leading blockchain for practical, everyday payments. Ultimately, the future of Bitcoin Cash will not be decided by marketing or speculation, but by something simpler: whether people actually use it. When we started this journey, we asked a simple question: what happens when a community can't agree on the future of money? Bitcoin Cash is the living answer to that question. Born out of conflict, BCH carried forward the dream that Bitcoin itself once promised: fast, cheap, peer-to-peer transactions that anyone in the world could use. It wasn't about holding an asset like gold. It was about spending, sharing, and moving value like cash. Looking back, Bitcoin Cash is more than just a technical fork. It's a philosophical fork. Where Bitcoin leaned into scarcity and security, BCH leaned into usability and access. That decision created a blockchain that works incredibly well for what it set out to do. Blocks are larger, fees are tiny, transactions are quick, and the technology is simple enough to be accessible for everyday people. And yet, the story of BCH is also one of struggle. It has faced criticism for being the other Bitcoin, for splitting the community, for failing to match Bitcoin's adoption curve. Its competition is fierce, not just from Bitcoin and Lightning, but from stablecoins, from fast Layer 1 chains, from every new project promising low-cost payments. In that noise, Bitcoin Cash has sometimes been overlooked. But here's the truth: Bitcoin Cash is still here. 8 years after the fork, it continues to process millions of transactions, to support merchants, to help families send remittances, and to serve as a tool for communities who need low-cost, permissionless money. Its survival alone says something important. Crypto is full of projects that burned brightly for a year or two before fading away. BCH, by contrast, has endured bear markets, internal splits, and waves of hype about other chains. It hasn't disappeared because its mission is too simple, too important to vanish. Money that works. The humanitarian examples stand out most. When people in Venezuela or South Sudan were able to buy food because donations reached them instantly through BCH, that wasn't speculation. That was real-world impact. When small shops could accept crypto without worrying about fees eating into their margins, that was practical empowerment. Those stories don't make headlines like flashy DeFi projects, but they are the heart of what Bitcoin Cash is trying to be. Looking to the future, Bitcoin Cash faces choices. It can continue being the quiet workhorse of crypto, the chain people turn to when they just need payments that work. Or it can grow into something bigger, leveraging cash tokens and DeFi to expand its utility. Either way, its challenge will be to remind the world that crypto isn't only about holding and hoping, it's about using. So, what do we take away from Bitcoin Cash? Maybe it's this: in a world where so much technology feels like it's moving away from ordinary people, BCH is stubbornly focused on them. On the father sending money across a border. On the small shopkeeper accepting payment without a bank. On the family receiving aid without delay. On the idea that money should serve us, not the other way around. Bitcoin Cash may not be the flashiest project. It may never reclaim the spotlight it had in 2017. But in many ways, it doesn't need to. Its value lies in being exactly what it set out to be: electronic cash for the world. And if you step back and think about it, that's still a revolutionary idea.